Hello everybody, it's jrobi. Got another position practice video today. And this one's a little bit earlier on in the match, so I think on my first video it was more deeper into the middle game. This is here on move 11, and it's a match between Alexander Alekhine as white and a gentleman by the name of Seema as black. And Alekhine had just played knight to c3 in this position, so it's black to move. And the general gist of this video series is to try to find either a move that maintains equality or gives a slight positional advantage. Now, to keep the introduction a little short, I've got a much lengthier one on my first video. The goal is to, think of the lines and variations as if you're actually playing the match, trying to keep, your time in mind, and see how many variations you can come up with that you think are very likely. So in other words, when you move your pieces black, what would white's move most likely be? And then hopefully over time, you'll find that your ideas kind of get closer to the grandmaster ideas. Now I think with this position, since it's still fairly early in the game that was being played, I think it's a little bit easier to see some logical moves, and that's like following basic chess opening principles. For example, you want to maintain control of the center, you want to keep your king safe, and all those kind of things. So in this video I did come up with some of the moves that the grandmaster played, which was good, but still it's early on in the match and some moves are just logical. But something really interesting came up, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it briefly here, and then we'll get more into it as we go. On one of my mental lines, I didn't like it. And I was like, well, I don't think I can play that, because you're moving the pieces in your mind and you're trying to picture the board and how you look compared to your opponent. And then when I went on to my next line, I came up with almost the identical position and I liked it. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. And I didn't catch this until I'm actually making the video, and I found that very interesting. I'm going to be looking forward to future videos in this series just to see, how I progress my thought process and my visualization skills, and then hopefully over time I'll see not only a consistency in what I think is a good position, but also a closer alignment to what the grandmaster played. So anyways, we're looking at the position here. It's black to move. If you haven't done so, go ahead and pause the video. And I definitely recommend you write down your moves and your lines that you come up with. And I've changed my video format a little bit here to make the coordinates a little bit bigger along the bottom of the screen and on the left-hand side. So hopefully you guys can see those better. I know in my previous videos, most of the time they're too small to see, but I'm trying something a little bit different here today so that the coordinates are more easy to see, so you can write them down if you want to. But we'll get started. So I was looking at the position, and I was thinking, as a black player, what am I facing here? And first off, you'll probably notice that the pawns, white pawns in the center, in particular the d5 pawn, is very well protected. But I was looking at it, I was thinking that it didn't really have a lot of options. It can't really come down, and capturing here for white wouldn't be in white's best interest, I think, because if white were to capture on e6, I think that black could capture back with the queen, and then probably get a good firm grasp of the d file. So I was thinking for the black player, is there something that I can do to get more center control, or even just more activity in the center that would be beneficial to me? So the first line that I thought was ex d5, and I figured that white's most likely response in this position would be cx d5, simply because the knight here is a good defender of these two pawns, and white's still going to have a lot of options for development later on. For example, the queen could come out, the bishop could come out, and white's, in terms of development, it's not too bad. Now from here I thought I would castle, and then white could play bishop to g5. And at this point in my thinking, as I was moving the pieces mentally in my mind, I was like, well, I'm not sure if I want this position, because I was thinking, if I were to move my knight, white could come in, capture the bishop, I recapture with the queen, and for some reason it just didn't look good when I was thinking about it. But interestingly enough, I'm going to go back to knight to c3 here at the beginning. The next line that I came up with started out with a castle, an immediate castle, and then bishop to g5, knight to e8, bishop takes, queen takes, and for some reason I was happy with this position. I was thinking that, I could play this. The pawn isn't going to come down here because if the pawn were to be pushed in this position, I could just take, and there's no way that white's going to go down these lines. He could push the pawn up to b3 to have both protected, since the knight is protecting the one here on e4, but I felt that this was just really good for black. But the interesting thing about it is that if we go back, really this is kind of what I thought originally was bad. So I thought that was very interesting. I'm going to be paying attention going forward. Now, I came up with another line from kind of a branch line from the immediate castle. So we'll go back to knight to c3. The castle takes place, and I thought bishop to g5 still, knight to e8. But I thought, what would happen if white moved queen to g4? So I was trying to kind of get into more of a branch variation, looking at different options for white. I figured from here I could go knight to d6, kind of, getting more attackers on the pawns here and blockading this pawn in, at which point white could defend that other pawn with b3. Bishop takes, queen takes, and I figured that this would probably be playable as well. For example, I could push the pawn up to b5 and maybe get some good activity going on that line. But the big thing that I came out with from this activity on this particular video was the difference between seeing a similar position as strong and then seeing this almost the same thing as weak in one line. So I thought that it was really it really helps to point out just how important it is to get better at visualization and getting the pieces moving in your mind, not only to find the best move, but just to be consistent about it in all the chess matches. So I think that as I improve in this, it's definitely going to help my chess out. Now let's take a look at what was actually played in the match. So we'll go to knight to c3, and we'll take a look at what Sima actually played in the position. And he came up with the immediate castle, and I think that, when I saw that the castle was played in that position, I think it's just really a logical move, because really this pawn isn't going to capture. We talked about that already, and it's a good opportunity for black to get its king into more of a safe position. So after here, Alekhine placed queen to e2, and I didn't even consider queen to e2 here for white. It kind of gets the queen off of the back rank, still gives the queen options to come out to the king side, and really I think it just shows again that practicing this and trying to come up with those variations while you're playing a match is important, because since I didn't think of e2, if my opponent would have played e2 in that position, I wouldn't have really had anything prepared, and I would have had to go through candidate lines and variations all over again from scratch. Now, obviously, you're not always going to come up with your opponent's move. That's how you lose chess games. But you can catch, the more often you can catch them, the better off you'll be. So from here, Sina plays knight to e8, and Alekhine pushes pawn up to f4. And Sina from there came up with bishop to d6, and from this position, black has a slight advantage according to the computer, and Sina was able to actually maintain that advantage for the rest of the match and come up with the win. Let's take a quick look at what the computer came up with. So we'll go to knight to c3 again. And the computer came up with pretty much the same thing, an immediate castle, but instead of queen to e2, the computer pushes the pawn immediately to f4. Now the match progresses quite a few more moves with the computer squaring off against each other, but black was still able to win in this position. Now I'm not going to go farther into the matches. I think that the general goal of the position practice videos that I'm making is to get better at generating candidate moves and just finding that strong move to play that either maintains equality or comes up with a slight positional advantage. So take care, hope you enjoy the video, and we'll see you next time.